I think everyone has an area of improvement, even if you're a specialist in your role, if you've been doing the job for a number of years.
Welcome to this segment of the Careers Podcast. With us today we have Francesca from MeDirect, and she's going to be talking to us a bit about acing your interview, so your job interview. So Francesca, if you could just introduce yourself a bit.
So hi to everyone. As you said, my name is Francesca. I work at MeDirect. I'm currently the senior HR manager for the admin and HR department. MeDirect is the third largest bank in Malta, and we are currently focusing a lot on digital and being at the forefront of digital, being online. So our tech, finance, risk, internal audit departments offer a very varied and different career prospect. At MeDirect, we do also promote sort of the career aspect. So when I say career, I mean, coming in at a junior level, at an intern, we've had a lot of success stories, which then keep on building their career across the years and developing not only within the same department. So for example, we've had people who came in risk, for example, and then after a couple of years decided they would like to switch their career and move to internal audit or to finance or to treasury or compliance. So we are quite a versatile and flexible bank. In relation to our sort of vacancies and opportunities we offer, we're also offering what we call a graduate program. So we're looking at young people still studying to come join the bank, to have the opportunity as well to work in the different departments in order to be able to gauge a bit, I'm studying BCom or I'm studying technology or software development, but what exactly am I interested in? And this is the right line for me. So we do offer this opportunity as well for different employees to sort of switch from one area to another.
Okay, thank you very much. So let's talk a bit about the interview process from start to finish. Since you work in HR, I'm assuming you've probably interviewed your fair share of people over the years. So we're looking today at, if you're a student, maybe you're looking to start working while you're still a student, or maybe you're a student who's soon going to finish their course, and they're looking into their first real full-time employment. Students in the past, maybe in their past experience, they've looked for short-term jobs, but this is their first maybe experience looking for something that's going to really serve them the long term. It's really going to potentially be a career.
Yes.
What's your advice, first of all, to students who are in that position? They're sort of lining themselves up for that first really big interview that they're going to deal with.
So I think the first important element is you don't start the interview when you're sitting down in front of the interviewer. You start the interview, apart from when you send your CV, is when they send the first contact to you. So asking you that they would like to meet you or asking you for further information. So it's very important that when you're actively looking for a job, or even when you've applied for an opportunity, you're available. You don't leave an email pending for 4, 5, 6 days without responding to the company who is asking you in for an interview. If, for example, they give you a call, return the calls, because it might be a prospective employer. So it's always good. The availability is important. And I think some people also mistake it. I'm just going to sit down in front of the interview and that's where I'm going to shine. No, you're shining through all the process, through all the interactions you're having with your prospective employer. So when they ask, for example, send you an email, make sure you know if the interview is going to be held online or face-to-face, and make sure that if it's going to be held face-to-face, you know exactly where you're going, and if it's going to be held online, there are no glitches. Audio is working, video is working. I mean, I think the most common words and phrases which we've heard this year is you're on mute or I cannot see you. So it's important that we avoid those elements, even so you don't build the stress level then during the interview where you're trying to sell yourself ultimately. And also make sure you know who you're going to speak to. So who am I speaking to? Am I, for example, speaking to the CTO? Am I speaking to only HR? Am I speaking to someone who's more technical? So you need to adapt your skill set depending on who you're going to meet. And then the second element is researching. So you need to research. So, I've seen the job description, I liked it, I applied for it. So the job description, if you're applying for multiple roles, and this is a mistake which we've seen a lot in the past, we send an email, for example, or even during the interview, and you tell them, so you applied, for example, for a data analyst role. Okay, I applied for about 4 of those. I'm not sure which one it is. I'm not sure which job description you're going to be discussing. That's one of the biggest mistakes. You should be showing interest. You should know what you're applying for, and you should know, so when you're going into the interview, what skill sets you are going to have to focus on. And when it comes also to the people you're meeting, it's important that you know who they are. And knowing who they are, not only knowing their job title and also their name, you should go research on LinkedIn, see who I'm going to be sitting in front of, see their past experiences. And from their background, you might know as well sort of what sort of expertise they might have. So even the questions they might be asking, what questions they might be asking. So that element of research on the interviewers is extremely important. Plus, it's important to also know what the company does. So we see a lot of candidates, so be it students and even not students, who come in and wouldn't even have gone on the website. So they wouldn't know, for example, we have a website for Malta and a website for Belgium. So they wouldn't have done their research. They wouldn't know what products we offer. Now, we're not saying that, for example, I don't know, someone interviewing for a tech role would need to know the financial and investment aspect. But someone in the financial and investment, for example, who are going to be retail facing our clients, should have gone in, should know the different type of products which we offer, even if maybe they don't have the experience selling them. Go in, do the research, check. And sometimes something which we find very positive is say, listen, I went on your website, but I didn't find this versus other employers, or I went on your website and I saw that this could be done better, or this was unclear. So give your feedback during the interview. It means you care, it means you've checked, and it means that you've done the research necessary to be there for the job. I think then another element is the being on time. So when you have an interview, it's important that you are always on time. And when we say on time, we don't mean if the interview starts at 2, you're there at 2. No, that's late. Being on time means that you're there 5 minutes before, you are ready, you are in front of your laptop, or you're in reception waiting for them. It's important that people don't have, for example, everyone's busy. Interviewers usually have back-to-back schedules, so they're extremely busy. But it's important that you don't make their life harder, because automatically they're going to say, okay, he's late or she's late. So even the first impression is already suffering there. Obviously, with this new element of working from home, I mean, usually people are dressed either in their tracksuits or in pajamas, so they're not dressed in attire maybe which is more appropriate for work. So do that extra effort. I mean, do your hair, put on at least a top, the bottom half, which is in front of the camera, should be presentable. And as much as possible, especially now that things are being done online and interviews are being done online, make sure that you are in an environment which is quiet. So sometimes we see people, for example, they're out in a park and they do their interview from there. So it's noisy. Or from the car. No. Be in a secluded room. Preferably do the interview from a laptop, not a phone. The phone, it's showing like you're holding your camera. It's not professional. And even possibly even if, for example, you're in tech or in retail and you need to share something, you have that facility to share presentation or to share documentation. So it's a bit easier. I think then once the interview has started, a very common mistake which we've seen is that usually students and even candidates in general prepare for an interview. So they say, okay, what might they ask me? What are the common questions? Okay, listen to what the interviewer is asking you. Do not say, okay, I have these set of questions, this is what they're going to be asking me. No, listen to what the interviewer is asking you. It could be that they move into a totally different direction and you are stuck on your questions and you are answering what you have in your mind, not what the person is asking you. And that is something which is very important. You need to listen to what the interviewer is asking you. If you don't understand or if something is unclear, don't be scared to say, listen, can you kindly repeat, or repeat the question and tell them, am I understanding correctly? So a common mistake is, for example, even we ask people to take us through their CV or take us through their past experiences. So students might have had internships, or they might have worked in and done voluntary work, or they might do sports, which are all very important when you're interviewing for your first job. However, they don't get those experiences and put them into practice in the role they're applying for. So they would just say, oh yes, I had, for example, I work and play, for example, basketball or football. okay, what are the skill sets which it has taught you for the role or for the company you are applying for. So they would just run you through their CV without sort of adapting it to the role they are applying for. Now, when it comes to students who possibly have no experience whatsoever, or maybe had a couple of internships which might have been more admin-based rather than what they're actually applying for, there are always skills, soft skills, technical skills, which can be adapted for each and every role. So you have to just get those skills and really sort of explain them in a way which puts you at the forefront that, listen, I've had work experience, I've been working in a company, I have work ethics. So those are all important things which you look for, especially in your first job. Someone who never had a job experience before might not be at the forefront versus people who said, listen, I'm going to work part-time even though I'm studying full-time. So it's very important that you use the tools which you have and sell yourself with those tools. Something else which students tend to hide are their weaknesses or their gaps. So they think because they don't know something, it's like, okay, the company is not going to employ me because I have a gap there, I don't know something. We know your students, we know that you don't have experience. We knew it when we saw your CV. So if we called you for an interview, it means that there's something, it means that we have an opportunity. So you have to sell your soft skills, you have to sell the knowledge you've learned even at university. A lot of students will try and hide their weaknesses. When an interviewer asks you, what are your weaknesses? They shouldn't even have to ask. You should just listen and say, I have a gap here. I've never done, for example, at university, I never worked on a project which has to do with selling investments, for example. It was all theoretical. So it's important that you just put that forward and give options of how you feel you can get there. So listen, I don't have experience there, but I've seen these courses. If I have maybe some opportunity to job shadow, I will be able to grow and develop. So it's always important to be as true and realistic as possible in interviews. I mean, interviewers probably have interviewed a lot of people, so they'll see right through you if you're trying to, pretend or not give the whole story. So it's important that you're as true, as honest as possible, and where you have experience, you say, and where you don't say that you have experience, so that then the interviewers can even build an onboarding process which suits you in order for you to be successful in your career.
I think from one of the things you mentioned, so these are all, I think you've highlighted a bit what an interviewer will be looking out for, the mistakes maybe students tend to make. One of the things you touched on is actually when you said about researching your potential interviewer. I think students, one of the things they're always maybe a bit concerned about or worried about is sort of, besides my CV, would a potential employer maybe do a bit of background check? So how can students sort of make sure that their public image is employable? Like, do employers look at these kind of things, like maybe a person's public social media,
Yes.
stuff like that? Is that something companies look into?
Yes, we do look at social media. I mean, the first element which we always look at is LinkedIn. So to us, like sometimes we go in and students wouldn't have created their LinkedIn account because maybe they never needed it. They weren't actively looking for a job. But I think the first step for people who are graduating and even students in general is to have that LinkedIn profile. Put your experiences, put referrals of any other students you might have worked with, any lecturers who are willing to give you a reference on LinkedIn. So that's the number one sort of place where we would check. Then yes, there is Facebook and Instagram, which we look at. So I would suggest students to put their Facebook pages as private, because obviously we do understand that Facebook is a private matter, and obviously everyone likes to go out, but if an employer goes in and sees it, then automatically they are going to, that first impression is of your Facebook page. So am I saying that it's going to deter us from interviewing you? Not necessarily, because we will give you the chance if we feel that it's warranted. But it does tarnish a bit that first impact, I think. So it's important that you remember anything out there and anything on social media is there. So it's there for a reason, and it's there for companies to use it. So it's very important that you are a bit careful, especially when you are on the lookout for a job, of what is posted. I mean, even on YouTube and all these things, like just be a bit careful of the impression which you are giving to a prospective employer.
So I think it's important for students to make sure that they're social, like when they're managing maybe their own social media accounts, they're not only thinking, what will my peers think, what will the potential employer think.
Exactly.
On LinkedIn, so you're definitely right when you said that maybe a lot of students maybe are not on LinkedIn or they don't keep their LinkedIn profiles up to date. To the student that's preparing for interview, what do they, if they're going to go through and check their LinkedIn, what should they make sure that they've put up, sort of what makes a good LinkedIn profile? Because most students aren't maybe well versed in it.
Yes, I think it's sort of an impression of your CV. So I would put any experiences you've had, any qualifications, and then there's also the element of the photo. So we've seen a lot of photos on LinkedIn which are more appropriate for Instagram or appropriate for Facebook. I mean, LinkedIn is a professional portal. So even your LinkedIn profile should be professional, possibly in a suit or with a nice background, not you with a drink in your hand at the beach, for example. It's not the image which you are trying to portray. So I think that putting down everything in LinkedIn, like a CV. So literally you can copy and paste your CV, and then there are other elements. So what skills you feel are your strong suits, or organizational scheme, teamwork, and those can also be included. And it's also nice when you're going through LinkedIn, you can look at other employees who work there. So it's even a tool on the other end. So listen, I'm applying, for example, at MeDirect. Let me see people who've worked there. Let me see how long they've been working there. Let me see what type of roles they have. So in that way, it's even a tool which should be used in order to research your prospective colleagues ultimately.
Okay. So let's say now we're sitting down, the interview has actually started. Maybe a student has managed to get all the first steps right, they've showed up on time, they're well dressed, everything is perfect. You already talked about one of the questions, maybe one of the points that students maybe trip up on, which is what are your weaknesses? Because maybe a lot of students think that it's a trap, that the correct answer is to say that you maybe don't have any, but I don't think that's what employers are looking
Not
for.
at all. So to me, and it's not only students, it's in general. If someone had told me, listen, I have no weaknesses, I'd say, wow, like this person is that sure of himself that he has no area of improvement. While I think everyone has an area of improvement, even if you're a specialist in your role, if you've been doing the job for a number of years, there's always something to improve on, because ultimately the element of the career world is developing, it's growing. So there's always new elements which come into the job, different technologies which you might be able to use, different types of investment. So there's always an element to develop. So I wouldn't even look at them maybe as weaknesses. Maybe it's more at least when I ask the question, it's more, tell me what you feel are the areas of improvement. What are the areas you feel that maybe they're not your strong suit, but that if you had to work on them, and if the company you're going to be employed for gives you the tools to work on them, you feel you would be able to develop further. And usually your areas of improvement change from one interview to another and from one job to another. It's never the same sort of areas of improvement which you'd have if you're applying for job A and if you're applying for job G, for example. They're going to be different.
Okay, so we've reached the point in the interview that question has been asked. Now maybe the person managed to answer it in a good way, left a good impression. Another thing which, especially if it's maybe one of your earlier interviews in your career, maybe you don't have that experience under your belt yet, one of the areas that's very taboo that students maybe don't want to ask out in the interview, but it is on their mind, is maybe questions regarding salary and income, stuff like that. Usually students maybe tend to wait for the interviewer to bring it up. How is a good way to handle that topic during an interview, without obviously it being in a way that's unprofessional?
Yes, I mean, a lot of companies now have started asking that question even through the application process. So they would already have been able, so it helps the student a bit that, listen, do answer that question. For example, on our website, we ask what their salary expectations are and in general, what package they are looking after. So make sure that when that question is asked, it's to help people have that uncomfortable, conversation during the interview. And then if the interviewer wants, they can delve deeper into it. I think something important, which as well a lot of people miss out, is going to the careers page. What benefits does the company have? Because if a company has, for example, 2 benefits, then there's X amount of salary. However, if a company has 20 benefits, then the salary needs to be different because you're being offered much more on the benefits element. And I think a lot of students miss that element out. They don't realize that there's a basic salary, but then there's also the benefits package. So they should adapt it depending on what benefits package comes with the salary. Because different companies offer different benefits package, which of course add up to a total compensation, which is different depending on the number of benefits you have. However, if there are companies who maybe don't have the question in their application process, I usually suggest for the question not to be asked in the first interview. I would prefer if people had to ask me the question, it's either asked during the second interview or else possibly ask for a conversation alone with HR where you don't have to be discussing, salaries, when the focus should be on your sort of profile and what you can bring to the table. So that is what I usually say, listen, let's have an honest discussions. I have these commitments, I'm looking to take out a home loan. And it's very important as well. We've had a lot of cases whereby, for example, a student would come in and tell us, listen, I want X amount of money to be able to come in for the job. It makes sense for me. One, do your research. So make sure that if a role, for example, would offer a salary, for example, of 25,000, you're not asking for 50,000. I mean, go online. There are a lot of salary benchmarking reports whereby you can have an idea of what your type of profile is worth and what your type of profile should be paid. Don't shoot up because, you just want to get in there and you want to have a nice salary. So it's very important to do your research even on that element. And I think it's just honesty. Listen, this is what I need, this is what I want. The worst mistake is changing your salary expectations midway because either you've not done research. So we've had cases whereby a student comes in, they ask for an amount of money, then after 2-3 weeks or when we come to job offer, they say, but wait, I've done my research and now I want 10K more or 20K more. No, listen, you should have done your research before you applied, not now at this stage where you've already gone through the whole process. Or the worst part is when you're played against each other. So I'm actively looking for a job and I've gotten 3 offers on the table. Assess them on the package which they have, the career prospects which they can provide you, and don't look only at the now. Look at the long term. Look at what the company can give you in terms of career prospects in the long term. So having a high salary now, but then never getting a salary increase, useless. Good. You have
in the long run, you regret it.
Exactly. In the long run, you regret it. However, maybe starting off at a couple of thousand less now, but then knowing that the company will offer you these amount of development programs, that the company will offer you training, that the company offers you extra days of leave to study, that the company can offer you progression and getting promoted both vertically and also laterally. So it could be that you decide I want to move to compliance from risk, for example. So I think you've got to look at the whole package. You can't just look at, let me see what I have in my account at the end of the month and forget everything else. Because I think that will be a very, very big problem and issue for the person in the long term if they want a career ultimately.
Okay, so I think so now we've sort of we've gone through the actual interview itself and what happens even before the interview. What about after the interview? So most of the time maybe the recruiter or the interviewer will give a bit of guidance at the end of the interview, but what should be your demeanor? What should be your plan after an interview as the person sort of sitting for it? Yes. Should you follow up yourself? Should you wait for them to contact you? What's the best way forward?
So one element is at the end of the interview, make sure you're asking all your questions. So make sure that if you have anything which is unclear, you ask them during the interview. 99% of the time, HR or the recruiter will tell you, listen, do you have any questions for us? Is there anything else you would like clarified? So make sure that you have all the information. Ask, listen, even if they don't tell you when they're going to be getting back to you, do ask, listen, how long should I expect? How many days should pass before I hear back from you? A week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks? And so get a bit of guidance on the recruitment process. If, for example, they tell you, listen, in a week's time, we're going to get back to you, we're going to send you an answer, whether positive or negative. And after a week, they don't get back to you. I mean, I see nothing wrong with someone sending an email. I actually suggested saying, listen, I had my interview last week. I'm very interested in the job. After the conversation, it seems very interesting. I would like to have the opportunity. And you ask where we are at. So there are instances where a company is so busy that the recruitment process takes longer than what they would have anticipated, but they can get back to you and say, listen, it's going to take us another week, another 2 weeks to get back to you, but at least you know where you stand. And even if they had to reject you, you'd know, listen, I'm being rejected. But sending that email, it's not really a chaser. It's more, listen, I'm interested, I'm here, I still want the job.
It goes back to availability, like you mentioned before as well.
Exactly. So that is, I think, key, even after, not just, listen, I forgot about the role, I forgot about the interview, I don't really care, so whatever, I'm moving on to the next opportunity.
Okay, so with that, I think we'll actually bring this segment to a close. Thank you very much, Francesca, for joining us today. There are a lot of, I think, really important takeaways that any student who's maybe considering applying for a job can take these things, apply them, and hopefully it will benefit them and get them the job that they're looking for. So thank you very much.
Thanks
and
to
that's
you.
the end of this segment.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.